Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from the Halo Effect March of the Unheard, out January 10th on Nuclear Blast. The album has 12 tracks, 44 minutes in length, and this is the band's second full-length studio album. They're a Swedish melodic death metal band. When it comes to the design of this record, this is an album that has a very interesting approach. I was expecting it to be more dynamic, to have a lot more ebbs and flows, ups and downs, really jolting the listener almost at every single turn. It's not the case. It's an album that progresses in a way where you could see the growth happening. You can see new elements coming in and adding value to the songs and adding value to the overall record, but in a way that it's much easier to process for the listener because the changes are happening in a very gradual way and not necessarily on a song-by-song basis. So this makes the record feel a little bit more welcome. It still allows for the album to have almost a very linear approach, but with these ripples that change that linearity and make the album grow exponentially, which overall adds playability to the record. It makes this album all around a much better album to listen to. When it comes down to the sound, this is an album that I've heard some people call it more progressive than their debut record. I don't think that's the right word to explain this record. This is a more mature, this is a more texture, it's a more rich sounding album. Now, some of those elements that add texture and richness to the sound have some progressive pieces to them, but I don't think it's enough to label the album as a progressive record or a progressive sounding record. I just don't see it. I look at the sound on this album and I see the inclusion of synths that add these incredible atmospheres, these very nice melodies, make the songs feel a lot bigger, a lot larger. Obviously, at times, those synths do have some progressive pieces in them, but they're there not to feel progressive or not to change the aroma of the band's DNA, but to rather increase or change the perception of the size of the tracks. I think that's more what I feel from them than anything else. And then you have orchestral strings that bring almost a symphonic element into this death metal sound of the Halo Effect, which also gives size to the tracks, which also makes the songs feel bigger. You have acoustic guitars that add a different layer of emotion to the way the tracks are constructed, to the way the tracks are delivered. So when you put all of these pieces together with the DNA of the band that we've saw on the debut album, it doesn't make the album feel like a progressive death metal record. It rather makes the album feel like a very rich, a very outside the box melodic death metal album that brings in some other influences in order for them to be able to express their creativity a lot better, and all around creating a more epic, bigger sounding record. I think that's what you end up with. You end up with an album that has a much larger width to it than the debut record had. You end up with an album that has a lot more for the listener to dive into, for the listener to listen to and really appreciate what the album is all about than the debut record. It doesn't feel as one-dimensional. It doesn't feel as much of a guitar-driven album, even though it still is a very guitar-driven album. But when you have these elements around the guitars and sometimes within the guitars that take you into different directions, that make you feel different emotions, that create different sound textures, you have a much better sounding album all around. You're just presenting the listener with a lot more, and you're allowing the listener to go in different directions, even though the songs don't necessarily do that, and the overall record keeps a very linear path all the way through. And then you have the drums that pretty much move in from the debut album to this album. It was one of the elements where I didn't see massive changes. I felt like the drums on this record help with the size of the record versus helping with the heaviness of the album. That's the major change that I see from the debut record to this one, is that the drum effect on this record is more in order to increase the overall volume and not necessarily to compact the volume and give that volume a little bit more oomph. But it's an ability that the drums have to really cooperate with all the other changes that are happening around it. So they're just another piece of the puzzle and not necessarily trying to be what shapes the puzzle, which I thought was more of its dynamic on the debut record. So one slight change, but outside of that, the performance, the sound stayed pretty consistent throughout as far as the drums are concerned. Once you get into the vocals, I think you're going to find an album that could have been different. And what I mean by that is that when you get to Forever Astray and Between Directions, two songs that use clean vocals on this record, perhaps at that moment you'll realize that there was opportunities to have those clean vocals earlier on in the record. Not a lot of them, but some pockets here and there. At least for me, I felt that even before I got to those songs. But as I'm listening to the record, I'm like, okay, if they're not going to use clean vocals throughout, I understand the idea, I understand the logic, I can live with that. But once you get to those two tracks and you see two songs that have a huge amount of clean vocals in them, you start to wonder why not use them slightly earlier, because the mood of some of the songs on this record, the themes of the songs, the lyrical content of the songs, the direction in which the songs are taking, and also those orchestral strings and those synths really give room for some of these tracks to use those clean vocals to their own advantage in order to better give an image of what the song, of what the emotion of the song is all about. So as I'm listening to the record, I'm like, man, some clean vocals here would have been really good. Some clean vocals there would have been really good. But I'm thinking, okay, there's not going to be any. When I see them, then it becomes absolutely clear to me that this album could have used more of those clean vocals, not in large amounts, just really sporadic here and there, in order for that size of the record, that sound-wise is there, would have also been there vocally. And I think this is perhaps the only point where the album falls slightly short for me, because outside of that, this is a very well developed album, more textured, more evolved, a more mature record than the debut album, without a shadow of a doubt. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Our Channel to the Darkness. The acoustic guitar opening on this track is really interesting, and then once that is over and the doors break in, you get hit with this heavy melodic riff on a super driven track. And that is what makes this song very interesting to me. The vocals help the experience of moving this song forward. Those harsh vocals keep up with the tempo of the song, and then you have a chorus that slows down the track. It really brings it down, and it then allows the melody to explode within it. And this is an important element because it allows you to see a track that has an ebb and flow, that has a peak and a valley. It also has a very proggy psychedelic solo in it. And once again, hearing that and feeling that, you might feel like, oh, once again, this is a very proggy album. No, it's just the texture of that approach, it's just the texture of that sound, but it's included in a song that all around has nothing of progginess in it. So that one small element does not define the track. It helps rather create more texture to the track, but it doesn't define it. What defines it is everything that's in it. And what it's in it is an absolute banger, both musically and vocally, very driven in the verses, and then more melodic, a little bit more bright and open in the chorus. Now, I already mentioned the next two songs, Forever Astray and Between Directions. Definitely my two favorite songs on the record, because the clean vocals on these two tracks work extremely well. On the first one, Forever Astray, it's the first one that introduces those clean vocals, and musically very driven in the verses, following a little bit of the same pattern of Our Channel to the Darkness. Very driven in the verses, with great drum sound, great guitar sound, and then the clean vocals hit you in the chorus, and that sets the track apart because it really opens it up. It allows you to really feel connected with it. They come in very melancholic, very melodic, creating a much different atmosphere, a much different experience, and allowing the track to emphasize the melancholy that it has in it, that it's not noticeable in the verses. It becomes completely apparent in the chorus. Then you have Between Directions. It's a song that opens up greatly. It has that orchestrational strings as it opens, and then it holds them in the track as a layer within the song, creating a very epic track. I think this is one of the most epic songs when you look at vocals and sound together, because you know the closing track, Coda, is an instrumental track that has acoustic guitars, that has these orchestral instruments, that has synthesized. All of these new bits and pieces that the record has finishes off in an instrumental song called Coda. So that track is important, but this song to me, it's the most epic one. That is a cool track, but it doesn't reach the epicness level that this one does, because that one doesn't have the vocals behind it. It doesn't have the size. And this one has the vocals and the size. It has that symphonic presence to it that just really elevates the track and allows the song to be very bright, very big, but have a very incredibly dark underbelly to it. And that's what makes this song as epic as it is. This is it, the halo effect March of the Unheard, out January 10th on Nuclear Blast. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Hit me up in the comment section, and I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.